poor girl finds billionaire trapped in burning car. His plea for life changes her forever. Why does the world only care once someone rich is in danger? That question hangs heavy in the air, especially when the person who saves a billionaire has nothing but the clothes on her back and a memory she's been trying to forget. In this story, we're not just showing a rescue. We're showing what happens after. Because when a girl from nowhere pulls a man worth billions out of a burning car, it's not just his life that changes. It's hers too, in ways she never saw coming. And what we'll see here isn't fantasy. It's a real emotion: fear, anger, guilt, survival. This video isn't about fairy tales or magic fixes. It's about one girl who never wanted to be a hero, and a man who finally saw what his money couldn't buy. By the end of this video, you'll understand. Why did she almost walk away? What secret the billionaire kept buried for years? And how one act of bravery rewrote both their lives. Sometimes the one person you overlook is the only one who sees you clearly. This isn't the story you're expecting, but it might be the one that stays with you the longest. The girl who talks to fire. Why does the world only care when someone rich is screaming for help? And what happens when the only person who hears that scream is someone the world forgot a long time ago? This is the story of a girl with no shoes, no family, no voice in the system, and the man whose billion-dollar world came crashing down in fire. But the night they met, everything changed. Waxing crescent moon, ashes of a childhood. 12-year-old Eliza hadn't slept inside four walls in 3 years. She'd lived in alleys, abandoned rail cars, beneath broken-down billboards and collapsed fences. But her current shelter, an old metal shipping container with a hole in the roof, was the closest thing she had to a home. Most people avoided scrapyards. The rusted edges, the stink of fuel, the screech of loose metal in the wind. It made them uneasy. Not Eliza. She moved through the junk like a shadow, careful, fast, silent. No one questioned her here. No one chased her off. And best of all, no one asked her who she used to be. Because the truth was, she didn't know anymore. Her father used to say she was born with fire in her blood. And he would have known. He was a firefighter. A good one of the best in the city. Until he died trying to save strangers from a burning warehouse. Eliza remembered the last hug, the smell of smoke on his coat, the way his hand covered her whole back when he told her, "I'll be home before dinner, kiddo. Don't eat all the cookies." She waited all night, then all week. He never came back. Prohibited. The company that walked away. The fire that killed her father had a name behind it. Vostek Industries. A storage site leased by one of their shell subsidiaries. No fire alarms. No updated sprinklers. Just expired permits and ignored warnings. The CEO, Dane Voss, gave a public apology. Donated $1 million to some firefighter fund. Went on a podcast about corporate responsibility. Then moved on with his perfect smile and his fleet of luxury cars. Meanwhile, Eliza lost everything. Her mom couldn't handle it. She spiraled, disappeared, never came back. Eliza ended up in a group shelter, then ran away after someone tried to touch her while she slept. Since then, she trusted no one, especially not the man whose negligence burned her life down. Cloud with rain. Rain, metal silence. 3 years later, Eliza sat on the roof of a crushed school bus, eating dry cereal out of a sandwich bag and watching the storm clouds roll in. She had learned to read the sky. Tonight's rain would be fast and angry. She stuffed the rest of her food into her coat pocket and climbed down the side of the bus, boots slipping on the wet metal. Her bed, a pile of blankets inside the shipping container, was protected from most of the wind. But the hole in the roof meant she'd be sleeping damp again. She didn't mind. She was used to cold. What she wasn't used to was what she heard next. Tires, skidding, a long, high screech, then a deep crack, metal on metal, followed by silence. Her entire body froze. Then her instincts took over. She grabbed her crowbar from the ground, shoved it into her belt, and bolted toward the fence line. She followed the smoke, fire, the crash. Under the old overpass, a black vehicle had slammed into a concrete pillar. Rain bounced off the hood, steam and smoke pouring from the mangled front end. It wasn't just any car. It was the kind you only saw in movies or behind velvet ropes at car shows. Eliza crouched behind a trash bin, watching. She saw movement inside. A man slumped forward, barely conscious. The driver's side was jammed into the pillar. The door crumpled like foil. Flames licked up the edge of the hood, spitting sparks. The passenger window was still intact, but cracked. She hesitated. The voice in her head, the one that always kept her safe, told her to walk away. Don't get involved. The cops were probably already on their way. If they found a kid near a crash, they'd ask questions. They might even take her. And if this man was rich, which he clearly was, it would only get worse. But then she heard it. A voice. Choked. Weak. Barely louder than the rain. Please don't let me die here. Gear. Choices. She couldn't move. Not because she was scared of the fire. Because she recognized that voice. Not the man's voice exactly, but the sound of it. The rawness. The pleading. It sounded just like her dad on the voicemail the fire department never released. Just like the final breath of someone who knew time had run out. She stared at the fire, then at her hands. She was shaking, but she didn't run. She sprinted forward, bent low, crowbar in hand. At the passenger side, she slammed it against the window once. Then again. On the third hit, the glass shattered. Smoke rolled out in thick waves. Hey, H-E-Y, she shouted. Can you hear me? The man turned toward her. His face was pale and bloody, one eye swollen shut. But he nodded. Seatbelt. Can't move. She leaned in. The heat burned her arms, but she didn't care. She jammed the crowbar into the belt clip and pried it loose. The belt snapped back, and the man sagged forward. He was heavy. Too heavy. She gritted her teeth, hooked her arms under his shoulders, and dragged. Her shoes slipped on the wet asphalt. Her knees scraped across glass. But she didn't stop. She pulled until they were 15 feet away from the car. Then the engine let out a shudder and caught. A deep, furious fireball lit up the sky. Man standing. The man beneath the blood. He lay on the sidewalk, coughing, barely conscious. Eliza crouched beside him, eyes wide, heart pounding. You're gonna be okay, she whispered, not sure if she was lying or not. He looked up at her. Through the blood and the smoke and the ash, she recognized him. Dane Voss, CEO, Billionaire, the man responsible for her father's death. She nearly stumbled backward. But before she could move, he grabbed her wrist, weakly, but enough to make her stop. Your name, he rasped. Tell me your name. She should have lied. She should have run. But something in his face, not pity, not power, made her answer. Eliza. His eyes fluttered shut. The sirens were close now. She took a deep breath and disappeared into the shadows. Hospital. Recovery room. Dane Voss woke up in a hospital room 2 days later with cracked ribs, a concussion, and second-degree burns. A nurse told him he was lucky. He didn't feel lucky. He remembered the fire, the crash, the girl's face, those fierce eyes. Eliza, he whispered. No one knew who she was. She wasn't in any footage. Paramedics didn't see her. And all she left behind was a single bracelet, scorched wire with a single tag etched with the letter E. Dane held the bracelet to his chest. He didn't understand it yet. But something about that girl, the way she looked at him, the way she didn't ask for anything, had broken something open inside him. Not just fear or guilt, something deeper. Back in the yard, Eliza sat inside her container shelter, her back against the metal wall, holding her knees. The fire was gone. The crash was on the news. And Dane Voss was alive. Because of her. She hated him. She was sure of that. But she didn't let him die. And now she didn't know who she was anymore. The bracelet she dropped was gone. She hadn't noticed until hours after. It had been her dad's. Twisted wire from the wreckage he died in. She'd worn it every day since. Now he had it. The man who ruined her life held the last piece of her father. She didn't want anything from him, but she couldn't stop thinking about the look in his eyes when he asked her name. Not as a billionaire, not as a boss, Just a man who thought he was going to die, and then didn't. Because of her. The girl who wasn't supposed to matter. How do you find someone who's trained their whole life to disappear? Dane Voss had everything, until he couldn't sleep without seeing the eyes of a girl who didn't want to be seen. The night of the fire had scorched more than his skin. It cracked something deeper, something he'd buried years ago, under meetings and press releases and red carpet appearances. But now the only thing that mattered was a girl with soot on her face and a name that didn't appear in any database. Hospital. 3 days in the quiet. He stayed silent for hours after the crash. The doctors said it was the trauma, the smoke, the bruised ribs, maybe even the medication. But it wasn't any of that. Dane Voss was quiet because he was listening to his own mind, to the silence after a near-death moment, to the memory of the girl who saved him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Knees scraped, hair stuck to her face, elbows burned from pulling him through the glass. And those eyes, not scared, not desperate, just steady, sharp, like they had seen far more than any child should. Who was she? He asked his head of security, Mason Reeve, on the 4th morning. Mason had been with him for 8 years. Ex-Special Forces, trained to track down people halfway across the world. But this was different. She's not in any official reports, Mason said, laying out a tablet with photos from the crash site. We got security cam footage from nearby businesses. But she's a ghost. Dane leaned forward, wincing through the pain. Ghosts don't drag grown men out of exploding cars, he said. Find her. Mason nodded. I'll need more than a first name. Dane reached into the drawer beside his hospital bed. From inside, he pulled out the scorch bracelet, the one made from scrap wire and scorch beads. He handed it over. She left that behind. The letter E is scratched into the metal. Mason took it carefully, like it was a piece of evidence from a case that mattered. Because it did. She's not just some street kid, Dane said quietly. She saved me. I need to know why. Hammer and wrench. In the yard, a kingdom of her own. Eliza hadn't returned to her usual spots in 3 days. The usual dumpsters were untouched. The usual bakery window, where she sometimes waited for stale muffins, saw no sign of her. Even the gas station clerk, who always left a bottle of water on the curb, noticed her absence. She's hiding, said an old man named Benny who lived behind the tire shop. The city's loud this week. That girl knows when to go quiet. Eliza was hiding, not because she was afraid of being caught, but because something had shifted inside her. She didn't save people. That wasn't what her life was built for. She survived. She stayed out of sight. She only looked out for herself. That was the rule. That was the code. And yet she'd broken it. For him. She told herself it was muscle memory. That her hands had acted before her brain could remind her what Dane Voss had done. But that was a lie. Something in her had wanted to save him. And that thought made her chest feel tight. Compass. Mason's search begins. Mason knew the city in ways GPS never could. He talked to people no one else noticed. He knew every soup kitchen, every shelter that turned a blind eye to undocumented kids, every underground sleeping spot hidden from cameras. In 1 week, he found girls named Eliza. None were her. She's not using a real name, someone told him. Out here, names are like clothes. You change M when they get too dirty. Then, he got lucky. A convenience store clerk showed him grainy footage from the night of the crash. It only lasted 3 seconds. But in those 3 seconds, a small figure ran past the edge of the camera's frame. Wet hair, torn coat, something clutched in her hand. Mason zoomed in. A crowbar. She had tools. That meant she worked scrap. He turned his search to the scrapyards. Ice cube. Eliza's rules. Eliza had rules. They were simple. Never sleep in the same spot 2 nights in a row. Never tell anyone your real name. Never owe anybody anything. And never trust a man in a suit. Those rules kept her alive. But they also kept her alone. Until now. She sat beneath an old billboard, half torn down, the face of Dane Voss still visible under the peeling paper, and watched the street below. She wondered where he was, if he remembered her, if he hated her for running. She told herself it didn't matter, but she knew it did. Man standing. Dane makes a decision. After a week in recovery, Dane checked himself out of the hospital early. The board at Vostek had already tried to reach him times. Investors were spooked. PR wanted him to give a press conference. He didn't care. He was supposed to be working on a billion-dollar deal in Dubai. Instead, he sat at his penthouse window, looking out at the city and thinking about a girl who wore a bracelet made from garbage. She didn't ask me for anything, he said aloud. Sophia, his longtime assistant, was seated nearby. She paused from typing. Maybe that's why she got to you, she said. He nodded. Set up a press conference. You're ready to speak? No, but maybe she'll hear me. Television. A name on every screen. The next day, every major news station aired it. A short statement from Dane Voss. Wearing a simple black shirt, no expensive watch, no polished script. To whoever pulled me from that burning car, I owe you my life. I don't know your name or where you went, but I remember your face. I remember your courage. And I remember the silence, the way you disappeared before anyone could thank you. If you're out there, I need to thank you in person, not just because you saved me, but because you reminded me what I've forgotten. My team has set up a phone line. No questions, no press. Just come forward, or don't. But if you do, I'll be here. Headphone. Watching from the shadows. Eliza saw it. On a small screen inside a pawn shop window. The glass was cracked, but the audio was clear enough. She watched Dane Voss speak. Not like a billionaire, not like a CEO, like a man. And she hated him for it, because it made it harder to pretend she didn't care. She pulled her hood down, turned her back to the screen, and ran. Build cap. The clue that broke everything. Back in the penthouse, Mason walked into Dane's office, holding a Ziploc bag. Inside it, a melted metal button from a fire department coat, and a broken ID badge. It wasn't from Dane's crash. It was from Eliza's dad, found near the fence line, stuck under a drainage grate. Mason's voice was low. I think the girl might be connected to the warehouse fire 5 years ago. Dane looked at the badge. It had Eliza's father's name. And in that moment, everything fell into place. That warehouse, the one they never fixed. The sprinkler system they ignored. The budget they cut to make quarterly numbers. It had killed a man. And now, that man's daughter had saved him. The billionaire who carried guilt in silence. How do you face the person who saved your life when you helped destroy theirs? Dane Voss built his empire on decisions. Profits, losses, mergers, layoffs. Choices made fast, efficiently, and without apology. But no one ever told him the worst decision he ever made wouldn't show up on a balance sheet. It would show up in the eyes of a 12-year-old girl who dragged him out of a burning car and vanished like smoke. And now that he knew her name, now that he knew her father had died in a fire Dane could have prevented, the weight of it was unbearable. But he didn't want to run from it. He wanted to find her. And this time, he wouldn't be the one disappearing. Office building. What the board didn't know. The executive board of Vostek was confused. Their CEO had nearly died 2 weeks ago. And now he was ignoring meetings, declining interviews, and refusing to approve the final signatures on the largest tech acquisition of the year. One director said he's not thinking clearly. Another said the fire changed him. But none of them knew the truth. The fire hadn't changed Dane Voss. Eliza had. In a world that bowed to his signature, she was the only person who'd looked at him without fear, without awe, without asking for anything. And now, knowing her name or connection to the warehouse fire, he couldn't sit still. So he stood up in the middle of a shareholder's call and walked out. "Where are you going?" someone called after him. "To repay a debt," he said. And he meant it. Man standing. Eliza doesn't want to be found. Meanwhile, across the city, Eliza crouched behind a vending machine behind an old church, picking the plastic wrapper off a protein bar she'd stolen from a corner shop. Her hands were still sore from the fire. The skin had peeled. New layers were growing back, tender and pink. But the pain didn't bother her. What bothered her was the bracelet, the one she dropped the night of the crash. It had been the last thing her father gave her. She didn't cry when she lost shelter, didn't flinch when people shouted at her on the street. But that bracelet? That one hurt. And now he had it. Dane Voss. She had tried to hate him again. She'd even started drawing a new set of rules, in Sharpie, on the inside wall of a dumpster lid. Never save people. Never trust clean shoes. Never forget who they really are. But the rules fell hollow now, because she couldn't forget the way Dane had looked at her. Like he saw her. Like he meant it when he said her name. No one had said her name like that in a long time. Brain. A memory that wasn't supposed to matter. Dane sat alone in his penthouse that night, staring at the fire escape door. He'd lived there for 6 years and never once used it. But now it felt like the only honest way to leave. He didn't want cameras, didn't want noise. He wanted real. So he went down the stairs, past the back hallway, out into the street. No driver, no guards, just him, and a name in his head, Eliza Ward. He remembered something Mason said earlier that day, that Eliza's dad had been a firefighter, that he died in a warehouse owned by one of Dane's shell companies. That warehouse had been flagged for safety violations, and Dane had signed off on a delay in repairs. We'll fix it next quarter. He had said those words in a meeting, casually, because the budget was tight. He'd thought it was nothing, but now he knew it was everything. Man walking into the fire. Dane returned to the crash site. It was quiet now. The wreckage had been cleared. Only a faint scorch mark on the pillar remained. He stood there for a long time, tracing the moment in his mind. The flames, the rain, the sound of her voice. Then he walked to the fence behind the scrapyard, the place she'd come from. He stepped through the bent wire, past the stacked junk, the crushed cars. Mason had tracked this spot, said there were signs of someone living here. And then Dane saw it, a small shelter made from welded doors and old couch cushions. Inside, a blanket, a spoon, a half-finished sketch of a fire truck drawn in pencil on cardboard, and a name scratched into the corner. Eliza. He sat down slowly, as if moving too fast might scare the memory away. Then he whispered to no one, "I found you." Beverage box. Breakfast for the invisible. The next morning, Eliza wandered into the alley behind a diner that used to toss out breakfast leftovers. It was routine, quiet, safe, until someone stepped out the back door and said her name, Eliza. She spun, heart pounding, fist tightening around her crowbar. But it wasn't a cop, not some social worker. It was him, Dane Voss. He stood there holding 2 paper bags. Grease stained the bottom of both. "I got eggs and juice," he said. "Didn't know what you liked." She didn't move. "You followed me," she said, voice low. He nodded. "I did. I don't want anything from you." "I know. I don't care that you're alive." "I know that too. So what do you want?" Dane didn't answer right away. He slowly set the bags on the ground and sat down beside the dumpster. "Just to talk," he said, "and maybe return something." He reached into his coat and pulled out the bracelet. Her bracelet, the one made of scrap wire and fireproof beads. She stared at it like it might vanish. He didn't push it toward her, just held it in his palm. "I think this belongs to you." Balloon. The first real question. Eliza didn't take it. Not yet. Instead, she crouched across from him and said something she didn't plan. "You knew." He blinked. "Knew what?" "You knew that warehouse wasn't safe. You signed something. My dad died in that fire because of you." Dane didn't deny it. He didn't pretend. He just nodded. "I know." Silence filled the alley. Eliza's eyes welled up, but the tears didn't fall. "You gave a speech," she said. "You stood in front of cameras and said you were sorry. Then you flew to Paris for a tech conference." He looked down. "That was the worst day of my life," she said. "And you went on like nothing happened." "I thought I could," he said quietly. "But I was wrong." "Why'd you care now?" "Because you saved me. And I didn't deserve it." Gloves. Truth hurts different than fire. Eliza finally took the bracelet. She didn't put it on. She just turned it over in her fingers. "I almost let you die," she said. "When I saw it was you." "I wouldn't have blamed you," he said. "Yeah, but I would have blamed myself. That was the difference between them. Dane ran a company. Eliza ran for her life. He'd ignored guilt. She carried it around like a second skin. Dove. An offer without strings. Dane stood up. I'm not here to fix anything. I can't. I just wanted you to know I see you. She didn't respond. So he added, I set up a place. It's not charity. It's not a rescue mission. It's just a house. Quiet. Warm. If you want to come, it's yours. If not, I'll leave you alone. Eliza raised her eyes. And if I come, then what? You own me. No, he said. If you come, then maybe we both get a second chance. The fire that didn't go out. Some people run from the fire. Others live with it every single day. Eliza thought the fire was over. She saved the man. She walked away. That should have been the end. But what no one tells you is that sometimes saving someone else lights something inside you, and no amount of running can put out. Scarf. She didn't want a choice, but now she had one. Eliza had never been offered anything with no catch, no strings, no fine print. Everything in her life came at a cost. A warm bed in the shelter meant giving up your name. A free sandwich meant listening to a pastor tell you why you were lost. Even silence came with a price, loneliness. So when Dane Voss said, I have a place for you, she didn't smile. She didn't nod or thank him. She squinted at him, like he'd offered a trap with a ribbon on top. He stood across the alley from her, coat soaked from morning rain, the wind tugging at his collar. He looked like he hadn't slept. His voice was soft, his words careful. It's yours. Not forever. Not unless you want that. Just a place to rest, eat. Lock the door behind you. Eliza didn't move. What do you want from me? She asked. Nothing, he said. She tilted her head. No one wants nothing. He didn't answer, just reached into his pocket and set a folded piece of paper on the edge of the dumpster. It's the address. You don't have to come. I won't come looking if you don't. She watched him turn and walk away. Only then did she take the paper, and she held it like it was burning. Derelict house. The old house that still stood. 3 nights later, Eliza stood on a cracked sidewalk in a part of the city she hadn't dared walk through since she was 9. The house in front of her wasn't huge. It wasn't gated or shining with luxury. It was just a house. A bit old. 2 floors. Chipped paint. But the porch light was on. She clutched the paper Dane had given her, now wrinkled and soft from her pocket. A line was scrawled across the bottom in pen. There's a fridge. The door locks from the inside. I won't knock. She waited. 10 minutes. Then 20. No one came out. No car drove up. No camera flashed. So she walked to the door. Her hand shook when she reached for the handle. She half expected an alarm, a trap. But when she pushed, the door opened without a sound. Inside, a hallway with wooden floors. A pair of shoes by the wall. A coat rack with nothing on it. To the right, a small living room with a worn couch and a lamp already switched on. To the left, a kitchen. She stepped in slowly, closing the door behind her. There was no one else. Only the hum of the refrigerator and a small paper note stuck to it with a magnet shaped like a fire helmet. Milk, eggs, fruit, cereal. Take what you need. There's more if this isn't right. Eliza didn't cry. She just stood in that kitchen for a long time, holding the counter with both hands, while her legs trembled beneath her. She hadn't seen a full fridge in 3 years. Bed. Sleeping like it's dangerous. She didn't sleep in the bed the first night. Beds were strange. Too soft. Too open. So she curled up under the desk in the corner, using the old hoodie she found in the closet as a pillow. It took her 4 hours to fall asleep. Every creak made her jolt. Every shadow in the hallway made her tighten her fists. By morning, her back ached, and her hands were red from holding her bracelet all night. But the door was still locked. No one had come in. She was still safe. Almost too safe. And that made her nervous. Speech balloon. The phone that rang only once. On the second morning, she found an old flip phone on the kitchen table. There was only one number in it. A contact saved as D. She stared at it for a long time. Not to call, just to wonder why he hadn't. Why he hadn't sent anyone. Why he hadn't come knocking. Why he'd left her alone. She didn't press the button, but she kept the phone in her pocket. Not because she wanted to call, because she wasn't sure she didn't. Clipboard. What guilt really looks like. Across the city, Dane sat in a chair across from Mason, his security chief, and slid a folder across the table. Inside, it was a printed list of every decision he'd made in the last fiscal year related to infrastructure spending. Delayed repairs, postponed inspections, deferred safety checks. All of it, Dane said. Turn it over to the oversight board. Full disclosure. Mason raised an eyebrow. You know they'll bury this. Or worse, spin it against you. Let them. And if the media gets wind, Dane shrugged. They'll say I went soft after the crash, that I lost my edge, that I'm bleeding money for nothing. He looked out the window at the skyline his company helped build. I'd rather lose that than keep pretending I don't know what it cost. Soap. The day she turned on the shower. Eliza didn't mean to stay more than one night. She told herself that over and over. Just one night, 2 max. But on the 4th day, she turned on the shower. The water ran hot, not just warm, but real, steaming hot. It hit her shoulders, and she froze under it, like the warmth was trying to melt something solid inside her. She washed her hair with the soap she found in the cabinet. It smelled like pine. She stepped out 10 minutes later, wrapped in a towel too big for her, and stared at her reflection in the mirror. She didn't recognize herself. No soot, no street grime, no shadows under her eyes. Just a kid. A kid who looked almost normal. School backpack. She drew the house in her notebook. That evening, she found a pencil and an old journal in the drawer near the couch. It was mostly empty, just a few notes scribbled in messy handwriting. She flipped to the back page and began to draw. She drew the house, then the fridge, then the fire escape from the night she pulled Dane out, then her father, or at least what she remembered of his shoulders, his helmet, his voice. And beside that, without meaning to, she drew Dane, sitting beside her, not saying much, just listening. She stared at that sketch for a long time, then turned the page. The truth she deserved to hear. Healing doesn't start when you're rescued. It starts when someone finally tells you the truth. Eliza had spent years learning how to survive. What she didn't know was how to stay, how to accept peace without wondering when it would shatter. And now, the man she'd once blamed for everything, the one she had pulled from fire, was about to show her the one thing she never expected from someone like him: honesty. The girl who still slept with one eye open. Even after a week in the house, Eliza hadn't unpacked her bag. Not because she was planning to leave, not exactly, but because something inside her still refused to believe the safety was real. She kept her boots near the door. Her coat stayed on the chair, ready to grab. And every night, she checked the locks twice, once before brushing her teeth, once just before slipping under the blanket. The bed was warm. The walls didn't creak. The fridge restocked itself without anyone asking her questions. And yet, her chest stayed tight. Because when you've lived waiting for everything to fall apart, calm feels dangerous. Telephone receiver. A call she wasn't ready for. The flip phone buzzed on the kitchen table one afternoon. It didn't ring, just buzzed once, a silent message. Eliza stared at it for a few seconds before picking it up. The screen glowed with a single word: lunch. She didn't know why it made her palms sweat. It wasn't a command. He wasn't calling her in. He wasn't waiting outside. It was just a question. But it carried weight, not because of what he wanted, but because of what he might say. She shoved the phone in her pocket and sat at the edge of the couch. She counted to 30, then stood, then walked to the door. Cityscape, where rich people eat quietly. He chose the kind of place where no one stared, where conversations were soft and everyone drank water that came in glass bottles. Eliza walked in wearing the only clean hoodie she had and shoes that squeaked against the tile. People glanced, but quickly looked away. Dane stood up from the corner table the moment he saw her. No suit, just a gray shirt, rolled sleeves, and the same unsure expression he wore the night she almost let him burn. He pulled out her chair. She sat slowly like it might bite. Neither of them spoke for 10 seconds. Finally, he said, "Thank you for coming." She didn't answer, just looked at the menu, even though she wasn't planning to order. He noticed, "I already ordered grilled cheese and soup. Thought maybe you'd be hungry." That broke the silence. Not because of the food, but because of the fact he guessed right. She was starving. Pot of food. Small bites and bigger questions. She dipped the corner of the sandwich into the soup, slowly, carefully, like it was some kind of trick. Dane didn't rush her. He just watched, sipped his coffee, and waited. Finally, between bites, she asked, "Why me?" His eyebrows lifted. "What do you mean? There are a million kids in this city. Some way smarter than me. Some who look cleaner. Some who would be easier to explain to your rich friends. So why me?" It wasn't an angry question, not even bitter, but it hit him like a slap. He set down his cup. "You didn't hesitate," he said. "You could have run. You probably should have. But you didn't. You didn't stop to think who I was or what might happen. You saved someone who didn't deserve saving." Eliza looked down at her plate. "I almost didn't. But you did." Silence again. Then she whispered, "I still don't know if I regret it." Fire. What the fire left behind. Dane took a deep breath. He'd rehearsed this in his head a dozen times. "I need to tell you something." Eliza looked up. "The night your father died," he began, "it wasn't just an accident. The sprinkler system failed because we didn't upgrade it. I signed off on delaying the repairs." Her hand stiffened around the spoon. He didn't stop. "We had just landed a big contract. Budgets were tight. My advisors said the delay wouldn't matter. I believed them. Or maybe I just wanted to. Either way, your dad went in, and he didn't come out." There was no performance in his voice. No dramatics. No tears. Just a man telling a girl what she already knew, but had never heard from the one who caused it. Eliza sat very still, then asked the only thing she hadn't before. "Why are you telling me now?" Dane didn't blink. "Because you deserve to hear it from me." Ice Cube. The words she'd never gotten from anyone. Apologies never meant much to Eliza. She'd heard too many of them, from teachers who looked away, from shelter workers who gave up, from strangers who said sorry before turning their backs. But Dane didn't say sorry. He said, "It was my fault." And somehow that hit harder, because it meant someone was finally taking responsibility, not as a headline, not as a press release, as a human. Eliza's lip twitched. Her hands clenched under the table. And then, without warning, the tears came. She tried to fight them. She really did. But they rolled down her cheeks silently, landing on the edge of the plate. She wiped her face with her sleeve. "I don't cry," she said quietly. "I do," Dane replied. That made her snort, then sniff, then smile just barely. It was the first one he'd seen. Chair. A chair with her name on it. When the waiter came to clear the plates, Dane stood and left a tip so big Eliza's eyes widened. "Is that normal?" she asked. "No," he replied. "But he didn't stare at you. That counts." They walked side by side down the sidewalk. Not close, but not distant. Dane stopped at a shop window with a small desk inside. "I've been working on something," he said. He pointed to a corner behind the glass. Inside was a photo, black and white, of a firefighter in full gear, face half turned. The name tag on the jacket was clear. Ward. Her breath caught. Next to it, a small plaque read, "To those who ran toward the fire, even when they knew no one was coming to save them." Underneath, in smaller print, "Dedicated by DV." Eliza stared at the photo for a long time, then turned to Dane. "That's really him," she said. "That's my dad." He nodded. "I didn't know his name that night, but now I do." House. The house that waited. Back at the house, Eliza walked into the kitchen and saw something new on the table. A folder. Inside, a school application, a photo ID form, a blank sheet titled Medical History, and a sticky note on top. "Only if you want. Not required. Just available." She stared at it. No pressure, no demands, just a door, left unlocked. She didn't fill it out, not yet, but she didn't throw it away either. Shadows from the past. The past isn't done with you just because you leave it behind. Eliza thought the fire was the only thing that could burn her. But some flames come back in memories, in people, and in moments you never expect. Now that she's stepped into a life she never dreamed of, the past isn't ready to let go. And Dane is about to learn that protecting her means facing the shadows that almost destroyed her. Man detective. Unseen eyes watching. Eliza hadn't told anyone where she was staying. Not the shelter workers. Not the few friends she had left. Not even the street vendors who sometimes gave her a warm meal. But in the city's underbelly, news travels fast. Someone had noticed a girl disappearing from the scrapyards. Someone who didn't like the idea of her slipping through the cracks. One rainy afternoon, a man in a dark coat waited by the fence of the scrapyard. He had a face worn by years of hard choices and eyes sharp as broken glass. He didn't know Eliza personally, but he knew who her father was, and he knew what the Voss family had done. Police Garlight, an unexpected visitor. That evening, just as Eliza was about to close the door on a day she wished would end quietly, there was a knock. Her heart pounded. She wasn't used to visitors. She peeked through the peephole. A man, mid-zeros, serious, holding a folder. "I'm Detective Harris," he said before she could say anything. "I need to talk to you about your father." Eliza didn't answer. Her mind raced. Was this good news? Bad news? Or something worse? Fire. The fire that won't let go. Detective Harris sat quietly, hands folded on the kitchen table. "I've been investigating that warehouse fire for months," he began. Eliza's hands clenched into fists. He looked up, meeting her eyes. "We found new evidence. Evidence that suggests the fire might have been started deliberately." Her breath hitched. "Arson." He nodded. "We believe someone wanted to cover up negligence. Someone who didn't want the truth to come out." Eliza's chest tightened. She felt the past crashing into her present. And she wondered, was she safe here? Or was the fire following her? Office building. Dane's choice. Meanwhile, Dane sat in his office, the city lights flickering outside. His phone rang. It was Mason. "Detective Harris wants to meet." New developments in the warehouse case. Dane's stomach clenched. He knew this meant trouble. For Eliza. For him. But there was no hesitation. "We protect her," Dane said firmly. "Whatever it takes." Shield. A promise in the dark. That night, Dane returned to the house. He found Eliza sitting by the window, staring into the dark streets. She didn't flinch when he entered. He sat beside her. "You're not alone," he said. She looked at him, eyes tired but fierce. "I'm scared." He nodded, understanding more than words could say. "We'll face it together." For the first time, Eliza let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the fire wasn't the only thing she had to fight. Candle. The fire inside. The days that followed were filled with tension and whispers. Detective Harris came by again, gentle but firm. Eliza answered questions she never thought she'd have to. Dane made calls, lawyers, security, old contacts. But beneath it all, something else was burning. A new fire. One of hope. Because sometimes, to survive the past, you have to light a new way forward. When walls start to fall, trust isn't given. It's built, one moment, one choice at a time. Eliza had lived behind walls for so long. Walls built from pain, fear, and broken promises. But sometimes, those walls start to crack when you least expect it. Dane was no stranger to walls of his own. And now, their worlds were colliding in ways neither could control, testing everything they thought they knew about trust, forgiveness, and family. House. A step inside her world. Dane wasn't used to uncertainty. Every decision he made had a clear outcome. But Eliza's world was different. Messy, unpredictable, raw. One rainy afternoon, Dane asked her a simple question. "Can I see where you grew up?" Her first reaction was to say no, but then something in his eyes stopped her. She nodded. The scrapyard wasn't far, a labyrinth of twisted metal, shattered glass, and rusting dreams. Eliza led him through narrow paths only she knew. Fire. Memories in the rust. The scrapyard was silent, but alive with memory. Eliza stopped by a pile of twisted beams. "This is where I found the bracelet." She crouched, picking up a small piece of wire, bent, scorched, but still strong. "After the crash, I thought about leaving this all behind." Dane watched her, realizing that for her, the scrapyard wasn't just a place. It was a story of survival, of loss, of hope. Broken heart. The night that changed everything. They sat by a small fire she'd made from scraps. Eliza spoke for the first time about that night, the crash, the fire, the moment she pulled him out. "I almost didn't," she confessed, eyes fixed on the flames. "But then I heard you." She looked at Dane. "Your plea." It wasn't just words. It was a sound that made her freeze, and then move. Dane felt the weight of those words like a spark lighting a fuse inside him. Handshake. Breaking through the silence. Back at the house, Dane tried to bridge the gap. He asked about her dreams. Not the ones where she survived. The ones where she thrived. Eliza hesitated. "Do you really want to know?" He nodded. She smiled, small but genuine. "Maybe I want to be more than just the girl who survives fires." Old key. The key to trust. The next morning, Dane left a key on the kitchen table. No note, no demands, just a key. Eliza found it and held it for a long time. It was more than metal. It was an invitation and a promise. Mantelpiece clock. The past returns. Just when things felt like they might settle, the phone rang again. Detective Harris was back, this time with new questions, new leads. Eliza knew the walls she built around herself were going to be tested. And so was Dane, facing the fire together. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought not against flames, but within ourselves. Eliza and Dane's lives were more intertwined now than either could have imagined. The past was closing in, but so was something new, the chance to heal, to trust, and to fight together. In this chapter, the fire outside was nothing compared to the fire inside, the one that tests love, courage, and forgiveness. Magnifying glass tilted left. New evidence, new fears. Detective Harris arrived at the house again, his face grim. "We've uncovered something," he said, sliding a folder across the kitchen table. Eliza opened it carefully. Inside were photos and documents linking Vosteka's warehouse fire to a cover-up, emails ordering delays, falsified inspection reports, even a note about bribes. Eliza felt her chest tighten. The fire wasn't just an accident. It was deliberate. Balance scale. Dane's reckoning. When Dane heard the news, he didn't hesitate. He called a press conference and publicly admitted the company's failures. He promised full cooperation with the investigation. Board members were furious. Investors panicked. But Dane knew this was the only way forward. No amount of money could erase the past. Only truth could. Palms up together. Eliza's moment of choice. Eliza wrestled with what to do. Her father's death had left wounds too deep to heal overnight. Could she stand beside the man whose decisions cost her everything? She remembered the night she pulled him from the burning car. His plea for life had been raw, human. Maybe that was what they both needed, a chance to be seen as more than their past mistakes. House with garden, building a new home. Together, Dane and Eliza began transforming the house. It wasn't about luxury. It was about creating a space where trust could grow. Eliza planted flowers by the porch. Dane fixed the creaky stairs. They shared dinners, stories, and silences. Every small act was a brick in their new foundation. Speech balloon. A conversation that changed everything. One evening, as the sun set, Eliza asked Dane, "Why did you never tell anyone the truth before?" Dane looked out the window. "I was scared," he admitted. "Scared of losing everything. Scared of admitting I was wrong." She nodded. "We're all scared, but being brave means facing it anyway." That night, they both understood that healing was a journey, not a destination. The fire that forgives. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. it lights a path for the future. Eliza and Dane had come a long way, from strangers torn apart by fire and guilt, to two people standing side by side, ready to face the consequences of truth. But forgiveness, both given and received, was the final, hardest blaze to walk through. This part reveals how healing requires courage and opens the door to a future neither could have imagined alone. Fire, the public reckoning. The press conference had set the world buzzing. Dane faced the media, eyes tired but honest. He confessed that his company's shortcuts had caused a man's death, Eliza's father. "I accept full responsibility," he said, "and I will do everything to ensure it never happens again." The crowd murmured. Some called for justice, others for change. Eliza watched from the sidelines, heart pounding. She knew this was more than words. It was a turning point. Broken heart, the weight of the past. Despite the public apology, Eliza's wounds ran deep. She often woke up in the middle of the night, the smell of smoke filling her lungs. The memories of that warehouse fire, the screams, the helplessness, haunted her. She tried to push them away, but knew she couldn't outrun her past forever. Dane noticed her quiet struggles, but gave her space. Because sometimes healing meant waiting until she was ready. A hand offered, a hand taken. One evening, as rain drummed against the windows, Eliza sat by the fireplace. Dane joined her, offering a cup of tea. She hesitated, then took it. Their hands brushed. Neither spoke. But in that silence, a promise passed between them. A promise that they would face the shadows together. Seedling. Steps toward tomorrow. They began attending therapy sessions, separately at first, then together. Eliza found strength in sharing her story. Dane confronted his guilt and learned to listen. Their journey wasn't linear. There were setbacks and tears. But each day, they took one step forward. House with garden. A new family. The house no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like home. Eliza laughed again. Dane found peace he hadn't known he needed. They weren't just billionaire and homeless girl anymore. They were family, a fire reborn. Sometimes, the brightest flames come from the ashes of our darkest nights. The journey of Eliza and Dane was never meant to be easy. But together, they learned that fire could destroy, or it could forge something stronger. This final chapter is about hope, new beginnings, and the power of unexpected bonds to change lives forever. Sunrise, the dawn of a new life. Months had passed since the crash. Eliza woke up in a room filled with sunlight. No longer hiding from the world, she faced it head-on. She wore clean clothes, walked with steady steps, and carried herself with quiet confidence. The house they shared was alive, filled with laughter, music, and the smells of home-cooked meals. Graduation cap, chasing dreams. Eliza's acceptance into the Fire Academy marked a new chapter. The same fire that had taken her father now became her calling. She trained hard, her determination inspiring those around her. Dane watched proudly, knowing she was building her own legacy, one not defined by loss, but by courage. Hugging face, healing through connection. Their relationship deepened, grounded in honesty and respect. They celebrated small victories, first solo cooking attempt, a graduation milestone, a quiet evening watching the stars. Through it all, they were each other's anchors, steady in a world still unpredictable. Glowing star, giving back. Together, they launched a foundation in her father's name, focused on fire safety education and support for families affected by tragedy. It became a beacon of hope. Eliza spoke openly about her story, inspiring others to find strength in adversity. Dove, the legacy of fire. One evening, standing together by the fireplace, Dane turned to Eliza. "We were both broken," he said softly, "but look what we built from the ashes." She smiled. "Not just built, we're still building." Their hands found each other, and for the first time in a long time, both felt truly home.